I'm really excited for what Rachel's going to come and share as we continue our When You Pray series of talks. But first, I'm going to read from Scripture. If we get the little slide up, there we go. If you've got a Bible and you want to keep it out, then we are in Matthew 6. But I'm going to read it from the screen because my eyesight's getting worse and worse. Matthew 6. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray, standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This, then, is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's give it up for Rachel Norris.
Good morning. It's lovely to be with you all this morning. You will notice that I sound fairly full of cold. We have just got back from a pretty soggy week in Cornwall. Lovely, but soggy. So bear with me if I have a hacking cough halfway through. Anyway, today's not about me, it's about Jesus. So this morning we are going to be talking about give us your daily bread. Now, I wonder, have you ever taken something that wasn't yours, that you weren't supposed to take? Most likely, we all probably have. I certainly have. And the example I want to give you today is about a pair of my mum's shoes. Now, to give you a little bit of context here, my mum is legendary when it comes to her shoe collection. I know no other woman who takes photos of her shoes, puts them on the front of the box and the top of the box, so that when they're in the cupboard, she can see which pairs there are. I mean, it's amazing organisation. And I can't say that that's transferred over to my wardrobe, but she has a beautiful collection of shoes. I needed a pair of black stilettos for my A-level drama exam. I was playing a landlady in a play. Yep, I know you can see landlady material right here. So I thought, well, what's one pair of shoes amongst probably about 100? I'll just borrow them. It'll be fine. Anyway, a couple of weeks go on. I'm in rehearsals at college, and Mum wakes one morning and needs these shoes. Now, this also is the morning of a fairly big job interview. And at 16, I really didn't understand that a job interview is probably quite stressful. It's not the kind of morning that you want toothpaste on your top, or your car not to start, or your favourite pair of black stilettos to not be in the labelled box. So obviously, Mum, to be fair, was pretty cross. And I just thought that was completely irrational and not understanding. Now, as an adult, I get why she was cross. And I think, yes, she was cross that I took the shoes, but I think more than that, she was cross that I didn't ask her for what I needed. My mum is a good mum, and she would have got me a pair of shoes if I needed them, or would have let me borrow them. And so today we're going to be looking at that practice of asking, that practice and that habit of asking for what we need. And we're going to be looking at verse 11, so we're doing, give us today our daily bread. Now, the danger with this part of the verse is that we often get there too soon. We often get to God and we ask him for that shopping list of wants and needs that we have. And some of you may know a guy called John Mark Comer. He has this real knack of making stuff about Jesus that sounds tricky, really simple and really attractive. And he talks about how in the Lord's Prayer there is a flow that is strategic. There is a reason that this verse comes in the middle of this template of prayer that Jesus gives us. It is significant that it comes at this point because it shows us that actually there is a time and there is a place for us to tell God what we need, but also what we want. And the parts that we have looked at so far, that Matt has taken us through and Anna has also taken us through, have shown us that God is our dad, that he loves us and he is worthy of our praise, but also that he has great plans for us to tap into. And then at that point, when we get to this verse, our hearts are then postured and our hearts are then ready to be able to partner with him for what we need and partner with him for what we want. So for those of you noughties music fans out there, in the words of Hearsay, I'm going to keep things this morning pure and simple for us. And we're literally just going to split this verse in half. So we're going to look at the first part, give us today, and then we're going to go on to the second part of what does it mean? What is our daily bread? So I wonder, how many questions do you ask a day? Some studies have shown that 4-year-olds will ask between 200 to 300 questions a day. Now, Warren Berger, who is the author of A More Beautiful Question, says that actually, if you've got a child between the age of 2 and 5, in that period, they could ask, on average, 40,000 questions. Now, our eldest girl is 4, and I would say that some days that stat is true. Now, just this last week, we were staying down in Cornwall. Sleep when you're away with the kids is always slightly more disrupted. And in the middle of the night, there were many repeated questions of, Mum, can I have a drink? Mum, can you come and lie in bed with me? Mum, Daddy puts the audiobook on. Please, can you put the audiobook on? And I swear, one question in the middle of the night feels like 20, okay? And do I grant her every wish? No, I don't grant her every wish. That wouldn't be responsible parenting when she is asking to go to Babacombe Sweet Shop for the 6th time in a day. But do I love that she asks me? Yes, I love it. And God is so much like this. He loves it when we ask him. Now, Pete Gregg, some of you may have heard of him. He is the co-founder and leader of a prayer movement called 24/7 Prayer. Pete and I wax lyrical about him all the time. He has so many amazing resources. If you want to try prayer for the first time or you just want to get deeper in your prayer life with God, he's a great place to look. And he says about the Lord's Prayer that the most instinctive form of prayer is asking God for stuff and asking God for help. But surely, if God is who he says he is, if, as he says, that he knows how many hairs we have on our head, he knows our thoughts before we even think them, then why does he actually need us to tell him that? Surely he must know it already, right? Well, this is where I love the story of blind Bartimaeus, and it's one of the Jesus encounters that we read in the Gospels. Jesus is passing through Jericho, and there are many people on the sides of the road who are helpless and hopeless and in need of Jesus, in need of help. And Bartimaeus cries out to him and he says, Lord, have mercy on me. And he gets through the crowd and he scrabbles and he gets to Jesus and he looks at Jesus and Jesus says, well, what would you have me do for you? And all the people around him are like, Jesus, this guy, he's blind. And Jesus says, what would you have me do for you? And Bartimaeus replies, I want to see. And then Jesus goes, oh, and heals him. Now, what is going on there? What is going on in that passage? Why did Jesus do that? Why did Jesus ask him what he wanted? This is Jesus saying to us, ask me, and keep asking. And after Jesus gives this template of prayer, the Lord's Prayer, to the people listening at the time, he goes on to then tell us later in the next chapter in Matthew 7, he tells us that to ask for things and we will receive those things, to seek for him and that we will go on and find him. And he tells us that the Father God loves to give us good gifts and give good gifts to his children. And so we should be asking for them. And I actually think this is way simpler than we make it sometimes, that ultimately Jesus is your Father and he is in heaven and he wants to bless you, and that we need to ask him for stuff that we want as well as the stuff that we need, because actually the secret is in the asking. God is personal and God is relational, and he wants to help you with your problems. He wants to share with you in your needs, and it is okay to present him with what you want. Because actually it's all about the asking, it's all about the repetition of the request and that habit and practice of asking him. But, there's always a but, isn't there? When you do ask him, don't censor yourself. Present that longing, present that unwanted need or want in your heart to him in its absolute entirety. I so often think with God that I need to give him these lovely phrases and these fancy words because I just want to impress him and I want to please him. And yeah, actually, I do want to please him because I love him, but I don't actually need to make it palatable. I don't need to package it and kind of put it in a polite kind of way. I can bring the messy, groaning parts of my heart to him and just give it in all of its entirety. Because after all, God knows and God understands what that unfulfilled longing, what that want is in your heart already. And part of you bringing it to him, completely uncovered, uncensored, bubbling over, kind of in a jumbly mess, is where the freedom comes. It's putting it into his hands and trusting him with the outcome of it. And as you do that, it's almost like saying, Jesus, I trust that the peace that you're going to give me is going to be better or enough than the outcome of what I am asking for. Now, I get it. Some of us live with daily heartbreak over prayers that we have prayed that have not been answered in a way that we want. And at times, it seems like God answers our prayers in completely random ways. And there are examples in my life, as I am there are in yours, And this is potentially a small example, but hopefully shows you what I mean. I learned what this means to ask God for something and not always get kind of what you think you're going to get back at a really young age. I remember one of the first times I really started to sort of talk to God for myself. I must have been about 6 or 7, and my granddad was dying, and I remember praying that granddad would live. Well, he was old, he didn't live. And it was a really complex thing for me to get my head around, that I could ask God for what I wanted or what I needed, and that God cared about that he wanted to know about it, but that actually the outcome is always going to be slightly more complex, and it isn't always going to go the way that we think. But what he does promise to do is he promises to be with you in that aftermath of you asking, in that in-between moment of where you have asked him for what you have wanted and what you have needed, and you are waiting for the outcome or waiting for the fulfillment of that. He promises to be right in that gap with you. And we see that in a really beautiful way in Jesus. We see that with Jesus. Just before Jesus goes to the cross, he takes himself off to the garden and he gets before God and he was like, God, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. Please take this from me. Let's just do it another way. I can't do this. But in presenting that to God and in bringing that messy, jumble, tiered kind of outpouring, he's putting it into the hands of the Father. Jesus puts it back and he trusts God. And in return, God gives him a peace and he gives him the courage to be able to go and to ultimately get to the cross. But what Jesus doesn't do is he doesn't censor himself. He doesn't package it politely or put it very neatly. He asks exactly for what he needs in that moment. So, as I'm talking, you probably have some things coming to mind about requests that you may be asking God or things that you feel you want God to supply in terms of your need. And what are you going to do with that outstanding request, that kind of ungranted want? Well, practically, you could pray incrementally. So praying step by step. So maybe don't go for that big, overarching prayer, but start small. What is that one small thing that goes towards that ultimate goal of what you need that God could do for you? Ask him for his help at each turn, because much in the way that children won't ask for 3 meals a day, they will literally ask you snack by snack. They ask you when that hunger first strikes. They ask without hesitation. They ask exactly for what they want, and they're immediate. They interrupt you. They don't wait. And that is how God wants us to approach him. So I wonder what it is that is your unfulfilled longing. What are you asking God for today? Because that's what this verse is saying. It's saying, give us today. What is it today that you have brought that you want to ask God for? Because praying incrementally in this way, praying step by step, it's not lowering your expectation of who God is and how he can work in your life. What it actually is doing is chipping away bit by bit at your heart and actually at the greater need and the greater desire that is within all of us, which is what we're going to go on to now. So, that was point 1. So we need to get into the habit of asking God for anything and everything every day and approach him just as a child would approach you for a snack, without hesitation and without self-censoring. Point 2, we're going to think about what is our daily bread? What does that actually mean? So, how many of you have ever received a gift where you've had to exercise your best poker face? We all have, and I'm sure there are many gifts coming to mind now. So I may have said to some of you that my love language, or one of my love languages, is gifts. I love to give gifts. I love shopping for people and thinking about what they might like, but I also really love to receive gifts. And it is the time and it is the thought that goes into the gift, but if I'm totally transparent, it is also the gift. So poor Pete, my husband Pete's at the back, poor Pete, at every occasion, however small, however big, the pressure is on. Now, if you ask Pete, he has a couple of mental images of my poker face when he has given me gifts over the years. And most recently, just in this Christmas just gone, he bought me this lovely Parker pen because I love to write letters to people, I love to write cards to people, and rightly, he thought that that would be a really special, thoughtful gift. Except I'm left-handed. Now, all you lefties out there will know my pain, yes. Fountain pens and left hands, they just don't go together, okay? Now, my Parker pen was absolutely full of promise. It was full of thought, and it was full of unrealized potential and really well-meaning sentiment. But actually, it was empty on the delivery. It was fleeting and not very lasting. And really, for a lefty, it was quite underwhelming. But Jesus is the opposite of my Parker pen. Our daily bread is a catchphrase which sums up all that we could ever need in the very person of Jesus, of who he is. He is our daily bread. Now, Anna mentioned last week a verse which is in the book of John, in chapter 10, verse 10, which talks about how Jesus came so that we could have abundant life. We could have a life that where we see promises being established. We could have a life which was realized, full of potential, lasting eternally, overwhelmed with his love, which is where belonging comes from, and ultimately freedom from everything that entangles us, whether that be shame or fear or anger. I mean, that sounds pretty great, right? I want some more of that. Now, some of my most powerful encounters with Jesus have been where I have drawn to mind in my heart's eye the very face of what I think Jesus would look like. And I have sat quietly and peacefully and pictured his face. And there is something about that person, that man of Jesus, that just quietens the noise that is in my head. It almost shuts down that mental load. It stops my beating heart. It stops my body from striving to do all that it wants to do. And his face, who he is, gets me to that place almost that I'm talking about in this verse, where I can then join him in a conversation. And he looks at me like he looked at blind Bartimaeus and says to me, "What would you have me do for you, Rach?" The very reason that he starts by asking us to ask him first is so that we can get our hearts to that place. We can get our hearts into that posture, ready for him to go and meet our ultimate need. This ultimate need within all of us for freedom, an ultimate need to be content, to be completely at peace. Now, Jesus was a fully human man, and he had to lay down his own wants and his own needs as he walked to the cross for us, because he went on to pay that ultimate price by taking all the mess that's within our hearts, all the actions that have been done to us, and ultimately the actions that we have done to other people. And in doing so, in going to the cross, he became our daily bread. He became the very bread of life. And so Jesus meets our deepest needs because he provides or provided our deepest need, which ultimately was freedom from sin and freedom from death. Jesus didn't come just to turn your want of a new motorbike, or your want to be 2 stone lighter, or your want for that promotion, or perhaps for starting a family. He didn't come to say that that was not significant, that that didn't matter, that you should be thinking about other things. He came to say that he cares about that and he wants relationship with you, to partner with you in that, but actually that he is going to give you a bigger need. He's going to provide in you and solve that bigger need, which ultimately is a spiritual hunger within all of us. He came so that you could know life in full freedom, in the love of God as your Father, and in his goodness and his kindness and his compassion to your wants and to your needs. Now, there is a daily dose of Jesus that is available to you, and that comes in the form of grace and in the form of mercy and in the form of love. And perhaps you've come this morning and you feel like your life is just one big Parker pen. It's a bit messy, it's not really fit for purpose, and quite frankly, to date, it's been pretty disappointing. I'd encourage you in a moment to bring your Parker pen and bring that unfulfilled longing, that thing that's on your mind. As I said to you, what are you asking God for today? And don't censor it. Bring it in its entirety and allow him to meet a greater need in you beyond that. I know that the prayer crew would love to stand alongside you in that as you do that. And that could be whether this is the first ever time that you have prayed for Jesus to be your daily bread, or whether this is the 100th time and you need a fresh sense of that today. Because when we ask God to be our daily bread, we are humbly acknowledging that he is the sole provider of everything that we could need, and that he will meet that and fulfill that in our hearts.